At that time, flying high was the strategy. Reconnaissance planes would cross at 15,000 meters altitude, out of reach of anything on the ground. Until, on May 1st, 1960, a Soviet SA-2 missile shot down Gary Power's U-2 spy plane at over 20 kilometers altitude. The pilot survived. He was captured, and the message to the world was brutal. No plane is safe up there.
It flies faster than Mach 1.2. It carries more bombs than the legendary B-52. It can roll and fly upside down, even though it weighs almost 180 tons. And it has fighter jet engines attached to the back that spit fire when the afterburners kick in. But here's the most curious thing. Almost no one talks about it. While the B-2 Spirit steals the spotlight with its invisibility, and the B-52 is revered as the immortal grandfather of American military aviation, there is a machine between the two that was cancelled not once, but twice. And even so, it came back stronger, racked up more than 60 world records, and became the aircraft that carries the largest load of conventional weapons in the entire United States arsenal. Its name? B-1 Lancer. But the pilots call it something else, Boney. And today you're going to understand why this machine is possibly the most misunderstood and underestimated bomber ever to fly. Buckle up. Today, the United States operates 3 types of bombers, each with a completely different mission. When you need to hit a target with total surprise without anyone knowing you're coming, you send the B-2 Spirit. It's the ghost, the invisible one. It goes in, attacks, gets out, and the enemy only finds out what happened when it's already too late. When you want a constant aerial presence, a plane that can stay up there for hours, ready to strike at any moment, you send the B-52 Stratofortress. The legendary Buffy, which has been flying since the 1950s and will probably outlive all of us. But what about when you need to deliver an absurd amount of bombs flying low to the ground, under the radar, at supersonic speed? Who do you call? You send the Boney. And this is where it happens. This is where the first big surprise appears. Most people assume that the B-52, because it's huge and iconic, carries more weapons. Wrong. The B-1 Lancer has 3 internal weapons bays, front, middle, and rear, that together hold 75,000 pounds of bombs. That's over 34 tons of armament, just on the inside. To put this in perspective, that's more than any other US strike asset. More than the B-52. More than the B-2. More than anything flying today. And if that wasn't enough, the Lancer still has 6 external pylons, capable of carrying another 50,000 pounds of armament. In other words, we're talking about a plane that can, in theory, carry 125,000 pounds of weapons in a single mission. It's an absurd amount of firepower. But the Boney isn't just about bombs. As First Lieutenant Davis Perkins, a B-1B pilot at Dyess Air Force Base in Texas, said, "This aircraft allows for global strike missions, projecting air power anytime, anywhere." And, thanks to its speed, the B-1 is able to integrate with fighters and other fast aircraft, something a conventional bomber simply can't do. So, wait a minute. A bomber that carries more weapons than all the others, flies at supersonic speed, and can even keep up with fighter formations. That raises an obvious question. How is it that a machine like this is so little known? The answer lies in something that few bombers in the world have, and that completely transforms the way the B-1 flies. If you look at the B-1 on the ground, with its wings extended, it looks like a conventional bomber. Big, imposing, nothing out of the ordinary. But the moment it accelerates and those wings start to move, that's when you realize you're looking at something completely different. The B-1 Lancer has variable geometry wings. This means the wings move and change position during flight. If you're an aviation fan, you've probably seen this somewhere else, on the legendary F-14 Tomcat, the most famous fighter jet of the US Navy. That's right, the B-1 uses the same concept, only on a plane that's almost 150 feet long and weighs 400,000 pounds. And why does that matter? For most airplanes, wing design involves a choice. Do you want stability at low speeds or performance at high speeds? It's one or the other. Trade-offs. For single-mission aircraft, that works fine. But the B-1 has to do it all. Fly slow to save fuel. Fly fast to penetrate defenses. Be maneuverable in combat and stable enough to deliver weapons accurately. The solution? Wings that adapt. The B-1's wings range from 15 degrees, which is fully forward, to 67.5 degrees, which pilots call wings locked. At 15 degrees, the wings are almost perpendicular to the fuselage. This is the ideal configuration for takeoff, landing, and slow flight when you want to use as little fuel as possible. In cruise, they sweep back to 25 degrees, the most efficient position for maximum range. And when the mission demands it, the wings sweep further back, between 45 and 67 degrees, turning the B-1 into a delta wing silhouette, ready to fly supersonic. And here comes a statement that left me absolutely stunned. Lieutenant Perkins, a B-1B pilot, put it bluntly. With the wings fully swept back to 67.5 degrees, we're quite maneuverable. The jet flies like a fighter at low altitude. It's fun to fly. Fun to fly. A 180-ton bomber. And what makes this fun possible are the 4 General Electric F-101 engines, each producing about 15,000 pounds of thrust at military power. But what happens when you push the afterburner to the max? Each engine jumps to 30,000 pounds. That's a total of 120,000 pounds of thrust. That's basically what happens when someone decides to put fighter engines on the back of a bomber. By the way, the F-101 engine actually gave rise to the GE F-110, the same engine used in the F-16 Viper and the Super Tomcat. But all this incredible technology almost never existed. Because before becoming this extraordinary machine, the B-1 went through the most turbulent history a military program can have. To understand how the B-1 got here, we need to go back to the late 1950s. At that time, a radical change was taking place in aerial warfare. New anti-aircraft missiles made high-altitude flight extremely dangerous for bombers. The definitive proof came in 1960 when Gary Power's U-2 spy plane was shot down over the Soviet Union. Message received. Flying high became synonymous with being shot down. The answer? Fly low. Skimming the ground. Using hills and valleys to hide from radar in a tactic called terrain masking. It's like trying to find someone dressed in black in a dark room. The radar gets confused by ground objects and simply can't distinguish the plane. The problem is that the bombers of that era weren't built for this. The B-58 Hustler was fast, but terrible at low-level flight. It lasted less than 10 years before being retired. The B-52 could fly low, but it wasn't its strong suit. The Air Force needed something new, a bomber that combined the Mach 2 speed of the Hustler with the range and payload of the B-52. That's how the AMSA project was born, Advanced Managed Strategic Aircraft. The program took so long that it became a joke. They said AMSA stood for America's Most Studied Aircraft, the most studied aircraft in America. But the project moved forward. In 1970, Rockwell won the contract and the B-1A was born. And it was impressive. It could reach Mach 2. At altitude, it had an escape capsule for high-speed ejection and wings with variable geometry. The problem? The cost. In 1970, each B-1 cost $40 million. With rampant inflation, that amount jumped to $70 million by 1975. And when Jimmy Carter took office as president in 1977, the price had already surpassed $100 million. Carter had an ace up his sleeve. An ultra-secret stealth bomber was under development. What would become the B-2 Spirit? Combined with the fact that cruise missiles could be launched from the B-52 at safe distances, the president made his decision. In June 1977, the B-1 was cancelled. It died right there. Or at least it should have died. Because when Ronald Reagan arrived at the White House in 1981, harshly criticizing Carter for having weakened American defense, one of the first things he did was to take another look at the B-1. The stealth bomber B-2 was delayed, and America needed something now. In January 1982, Reagan authorized 2 contracts totaling $2.2 billion for Rockwell to develop and build 100 updated B-1S. The B-1B was born, and here lies the most beautiful irony of this story. The B-2 Spirit, which was the reason the B-1 was cancelled, ended up being the reason it came back. Because the B-2 was delayed. But the B-1 that came back was no longer the same aircraft. And what happened next completely changed its fate. The B-1B, which rolled off the assembly line in 1984, was a different aircraft from the original B-1A. Its maximum speed dropped from Mach 2 to Mach 1.2. It seems like a downgrade, right? But it was a brilliant trade-off. With fixed air intakes and serpentine-shaped ducts that hide the engine blades from enemy radar, the B-1B achieved a radar cross-section equivalent to 1/15th that of the B-52. It's not a stealth aircraft, but for a bomber of that size, it's frighteningly hard to detect. And the Russians knew that. The B-1 was so feared by the Soviet Union that it was specifically mentioned in a nuclear arms reduction treaty. The solution? Remove the B-1 from the nuclear mission. Modifications were made to the pylons to prevent the mounting of atomic weapons, the nuclear weapon wiring was removed, and the nuclear pylons were physically destroyed. These conversions were completed in 2011, and to this day, Russian officials inspect the American B-1s annually to verify compliance with the agreement. Now here is the paradox that saved the Boney. The shift to conventional weapons, which at the time seemed like a limitation, ended up being exactly what kept the B-1 relevant. Because while the B-2 and B-52 kept their nuclear roles, the B-1 became the most efficient conventional war machine America has ever had. And the combat numbers prove this in a way that's hard to believe. In Operation Iraqi Freedom, the B-1 flew less than 1% of all combat missions. 1%. And even so, it was responsible for 43% of all JDAMs, GPS-guided bombs, dropped in the entire war. Do the math. That comes out to approximately 480 guided bombs per plane, 1% of the missions delivering almost half of the precision weaponry. Read that again if you need to. In Afghanistan, it was even more impressive. In the first 6 months of Operation Enduring Freedom, just 8 B-1S were responsible for nearly 40% of all bombs used by coalition forces, including about 3,900 JDAMs, which accounted for 60% of the total drop. In 2012, the 9th Expeditionary Bomb Squadron returned from a 6-month mission with some staggering numbers. 9 B-1S flew 770 sorties, keeping at least one bomber in the air. The whole time. This squadron alone accounted for a quarter of all combat sorties in Afghanistan, responding to 2 to 3 close air support requests per day. And while everyone loves the A-10 Warthog swooping in to provide close air support, few people know that the B-1 has saved the lives of many Allied soldiers on the ground. Possibly even people watching this video. In Syria, against ISIS, the B-1S took part in Operation Inherent Resolve. And on 31 separate occasions, the bombers went Winchester, the military term. That's when you've used up all your ammunition. 31 times. They emptied everything. But knowing what the Boney does is one thing. Seeing up close how it works on the inside is something else entirely.